Well, here we are in Ormond Beach, Florida, and it's with great pleasure that I'm visiting with not only my friend, but also a fellow Wolfhound combat soldier from Vietnam that I served with in 1968 and 1969.
That's
And
when it
Phil,
was.
I want to thank you so much for your hospitality and having us come in today and be able to share, your life story and your experiences that we had in.
Well, my pleasure, and always appreciate you, John, and all of the things that you're doing for the Wolfhounds and what have you. So, welcome to Ormond Beach.
Oh, yes, it's with great pleasure that we're here. And the way I'm going to start this interview is maybe you don't have a full concept about what it is we're doing. You talked to Paul, you knew we did an interview. What we're doing is this is an oral history of not only your Vietnam experience, but kind of your life.
Okay.
And so, as generations, you've got children, you've got grandchildren,
Got them.
you're going to have great grandchildren,
Right.
and then you and I are going to be gone. I've got 2 great grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
12 grandchildren and 2 greats.
Don't have any greats yet.
So here we go. Well, they're going to keep going.
Right.
And somewhere along the line, somebody at some Christmas party or something, well, Grandpa Phil, what a kick he was. And they'll say, well, we can go watch him. Well, how's that? Well, yeah, he's on the Wolfhound website. And we're going to try to get this project funded to the point where we can have this up for 100 years.
Wow.
Now, why 100?
Mhm.
Because it's going to become like an Ancestry.com in living color.
Wow.
Can you imagine your generations, 3, 4, 5 generations back, being able to see and hear you talk here tonight?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I actually have a nephew that lives out in Las Vegas, and he was one of the first ones that called me and said, Uncle Phil, I looked you up on the website and found you on the Wolfhound website. And I was kind of amazed that him and my other nephew did that on their own. So, in line of what you're saying, yes. Sometimes they do it without us because
It'll
we
be
had talked
amazing.
about.
Yeah.
I know how he started it actually. Now I'm remembering. He looked up 25th Infantry Division, and one thing led to the next and the next, because he knew that I was in the
Well, now, if he Googles your name,
Mhm.
guess what's going to come up?
Wolfhound.
Our interview.
All right.
So it's going to be a lot easier for your relatives and so forth to find.
Okay, now I got to be careful what I say.
No, you don't. Let's start out by where were you born and raised?
I was born in Queens, New York, New York City, and raised there. My parents had moved there from Jamaica, Queens, and went to Martin Van Buren High School, and grew up there at a time when it was a growing community just outside of New York City. And actually loved every minute of it because there were things that you could do a lot simpler back then. Like, I could get on a bus right at the corner for 25 cents and go to New York City,
Wow.
okay? Downtown.
Sure.
You felt safe way back then, and I guess you still feel safe now, but it was just simpler way back then. Totally enjoyed my childhood. I used to be in a band when I was a teenager.
Any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. My 2 brothers, I have an older brother and a younger brother. Unfortunately, both of them have passed away
And what
already.
were their names?
Richard and Paul.
Okay.
And I have my sister who's still alive and lives on Long Island still. And we come from
And her name?
Sheila.
Oh, Sheila.
Well,
Okay.
I'll give you the real names. That's on the birth certificates.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because we come from immigrants from Italy. My name is actually Felice. It's not
Oh.
Philip. It's spelled Felice. And if you were to look at my army records, that's what you would see.
I'll be.
Okay, I took on Philip because it's an American name.
Easier.
Easier. My older brother's name was Ruggiero. You spell that Ruggerio, Ruggerio. And Paul knows all of this. Paul
Yeah.
Naso knows all of this. My sister's name is Shelza, after my grandmother. And the only one who got a normal name was my younger brother, and his name was Paul,
No.
named after my father.
Sure.
And Paul and I, of course, his mother was my father's sister. And he also grew up in Queens. So we shared a lot in common, like Coney Island and stuff like that. And Paul, if you're watching this, I still remember when you came in your beautiful Chevelle Super Sport convertible and picked me up, and we went out girl hunting before we went into the Army. So
Did you, any luck?
of course, he went out. Paul actually went out for a while with my wife's sister. So
Interesting.
yeah. So anyway, heritage. My grandparents both immigrated, and you can see them on the register at Ellis Island.
Oh, yes.
From Italy. And so our parents, Paul's, mine, we're first generation. They were first generation Americans, and we're second generation Americans.
What did your dad do for a living?
He owned a dry cleaning store and a tailor shop. Okay. And
So he was a tailor?
he was a tailor, and even during a very depressing period of time in American history, when there was not a lot of money, and you were, during the Depression, or
Oh,
what have
yes.
you, he did well, and we had a very nice home, a house in Queens, and he was very successful. My mother, that's where they met. My mother and him met at the time when he was learning to become a tailor.
Was she a seamstress?
She was a seamstress
All
also.
right. Yeah.
And I kind of got off the track, but I said I was in a band when I was a teenager, and that's where I met my wife, Charlene, at a Knights of Columbus dance
Okay.
that we were playing. We were the band that was playing.
What
at
did you
that
play?
night. I played the drums
Okay.
at that time. So anyway, that's where my wife and I met, and 49 years later, it's all a bunch of history.
Wow. That's interesting. And now, did you volunteer to go into the service, or were you drafted?
I volunteered to the service.
Okay, what prompted you, or what
Oh,
gave you the idea to do
what
that?
prompted me was
And by the way, did Paul join too? Did he?
no, he got drafted.
Did that have any influence on you joining or going in?
No,
Okay.
not at all. What happened with me is I graduated high school, and my father wanted me to go to college. And at the time, I didn't know if I wanted to go to college.
How
I
old
didn't-
were you at this time?
I was, at the time I entered the Army, I was 19, but the time I was considering it, I was 18.
Just a kid.
Just out of high school. And I thought to myself, well, if you don't want to go to college, what do you want to do? And so I got a job in the city working for Geico. Everybody knows Geico. I was a file clerk at Geico for a while, for about a year. And I kind of got bored of that, and I said, well, okay, now what, Phil?
Yeah, filing isn't exactly the most
Interesting
challenging
job. So I said to myself, well, if you're not going to go to college, try the military and see
You'd
if
probably
there's
heard
something-
about the draft going on
Yes.
anyway.
Yes, yes.
Because a lot of guys did,
Yeah.
and they just thought, well, I'm going
Yeah.
to probably get it anyway, so I
Right.
might as well.
So that's what I did. I joined. I actually didn't join. I pushed up my draft.
Yeah,
And
a lot
is
of guys.
it- yeah.
A lot of guys did. So
Yeah.
you still only had to do the 2
2
years.
years, exactly. So
And
I
did
only-
they talk to you or negotiate what you might do in the service because you did that?
No, everybody was going to
Just the
Vietnam.
same. Just the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you a funny story. Well, quick story. I'm sure you remember this, or other people remember. They gave you a questionnaire when you went in. They asked you where you wanted to serve.
Of course.
And I thought about that, and I said, well, I think if I pick Alaska, nobody's going to want to
Nobody
go
wants to go
to
there.
Alaska, and maybe they'll send me there instead of sending me to Vietnam. Well, guess what? I went to Vietnam.
Along with everybody else that marked Alaska.
Yes.
That's a true story. Now, were you engaged or married or single? What was going on with that? Your
Yes, my
relationship?
wife and I got engaged actually while I was in boot camp.
Oh, okay.
While I was in South Carolina.
And that was my next question: is where did you go into?
Yeah, Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
That was your basic training.
Right, that was my basic training, and I called her on the phone from there because I kind of found myself really missing Charlene.
Sure.
And I asked her to marry me on the phone, and she said yes. So on my next leave, I came home, and we got the ring, and we were engaged. But side note, my father didn't want us to get married because he knew I was going to Vietnam.
And that was an iffy
Well,
iffy deal.
Yeah, he didn't want to leave a widow. He talked to me. He said, "Don't leave a widow."
Well,
And that was the That's kind of where the set in my head the reality of where I was going.
I mean, if
Okay?
your dad was thinking it.
Yeah, right. So, but yes, to answer your question, I moved up my draft because I was floundering and I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Okay. And then where did you go to AIT?
I went,
But let me back up just a second. You graduate from basic,
right,
and at the very end, everybody gets in the circle and they start calling out names and MOSs.
yeah.
Did everybody, I mean, did you go, maybe I'm not going to the infantry? Maybe
Well,
I'm going to go do
Yeah,
something different?
I thought when they said that, my MOS for the mortars, I was thinking the artillery. And I was thinking, okay,
And
well,
what
you're
is
gonna
the
be-
MOS for mortars? 11B something?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
you
I mean,
got
but
a
it's-
better memory than me.
But it's still infantry.
Yeah.
I mean, you're,
Yeah. But it's still infantry, correct. I mean, as you know, we were out in the field with you guys.
Sure.
And,
it was just a different platoon.
yes, we were, still going through the bushes and what have you, but not as often as you guys, the actual, infantry soldiers. We would come along with you as support, but it wasn't every time you went out on patrol.
Right.
Okay, every time you went out on patrol.
So now let's talk about AIT. What was that like?
AIT was,
Where did you go?
I'm trying to remember actually.
It wasn't Fort Sill, was it? Because they had artillery there. Did they have mortars there too?
No, I think I stayed at Fort Jackson for it.
Could have.
Yeah, I'm almost positive I stayed at Fort Jackson for it. And what that was all about was, like you see along the roads when they're doing surveys and stuff like that. Well, you need that knowledge in order to line up mortars, okay? And so
Almost like a surveyor.
it is. That's exactly what you are in a way. You have to establish true north. You have to establish a sight line and a stick, and then you use your scope to create the deflection and the range and everything else.
Up and down, right and left.
up and down, right and left. So, other than of course advanced infantry training, marksmanship and stuff like that.
Escape and evasion.
Escape and evasion. We also had to do this training for mortars.
In
okay?
addition to.
In addition to.
Yep.
Yeah, in addition to. And at the time it was very interesting, and I was going, oh, okay, this ain't too bad. Still not thinking that I was going to be out in the woods
How
with you
often
guys.
did they let you drop one in a tube?
Oh, we had to do that
Often.
on,
I mean,
often.
okay.
Yeah. Often.
Did you
often.
think that was pretty cool?
At the time, I did.
And of course, I can imagine the instructors. Some of them were Vietnam veterans,
Exactly.
and they probably said, "Now, the first thing I want to tell you, Phil, is when you drop that thing in there, move your hand."
Well, the whole thing too about that is the thing that you have to get used to, because if you remember back then, they never issued us like ear protection equipment.
No.
So the biggest thing that you had to get used to was your ears popping every time you dropped a round. Kind of like when you go up in a plane, your ears pop.
The pressure.
Okay, the pressure. comes out. Even with the little 60 millimeter, the same thing happens, okay? So your ears pop and you have to get used to that so you don't shake,
Yep, yep, yep.
okay? And, yeah, that's where my training was.
Now, did they train you on different size mortars?
Just the two, the 60 millimeter and the 80 millimeter.
Okay, and then
Okay.
was there a 120?
There was a 120, but we weren't.
You
we weren't
didn't,
trained
that wasn't
on
in our bailiwick?
No.
That wasn't in
No.
our
Yeah,
arsenal?
yeah.
Because that would be a pretty big tube, wouldn't it?
Well, that's the whole thing. It's too cumbersome to carry
Yeah,
out into the field. Even the 80s, we kept them in the field bases and stuff like that. It was that little 60 that we took with us that was a handheld, and it was pretty effective.
Yeah.
It was pretty effective.
you could squat and drop it, and if you had good
Hold
windage and.
hold it with this, and somebody else drops
If you
around.
had
and
good,
you're-
if you had good windage and.
Well, I remember using. I of course used it several times, but one time that comes to my mind, as we were out on patrol with you guys, and we were taking a break in a bomb crater area, and we got fired upon, and I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, but anyway, the fire pot was coming from this village real close, and it was the first time that I realized how I could truly determine right after the first round. Now, you don't have a sight glass with this. You don't have any of that stuff to assist you. This is a handheld thing. After the first round, I could determine, I could lay that next round almost anywhere,
Wow.
okay? And so remember now, this is a handheld thing. There's
Right, a
no
little
sight
60 little
glass, there's
60,
no,
yep,
you know,
yep.
there's a very small square base at the bottom of it, and that's it. And but you still have to determine your distances, and you're taking off the
Kentucky
powder charge,
windage.
yeah, to to get your distance and stuff.
That was another thing I've never known. Does each mortar round come with the same charge, so it goes the same distance, or how does that work?
No, each mortar comes with several charges on it, there's packages on the sides of it that light up all the same time. Okay, and you need to take some of those packages off if you want a shorter round.
See, I didn't know that.
Okay.
So, and that became second nature.
That
You
became-
knew if it
that
was
became
a
second
200
nature,
yarder
right.
or whatever.
And that became second nature.
Yep.
Yep.
So you graduate from AIT, and now you get your orders. And you got to go home probably for a couple of weeks or whatever,
Mhm.
and you're with your
Right.
fiance and,
That's when we had the engagement party.
Yeah.
I
you
still had
know,
my bald head.
a guy is feeling pretty high,
Right,
pretty excited about life,
right,
and then you gotta go to Oakland.
right.
That was a very sad day.
Well, we flew, was it Oakland? I know we landed in Hawaii also with the 25th Infantry
But I think you
Division.
left from Oakland.
Oakland, yes.
Yeah, 'cause everybody left.
Yeah, everybody
Yeah.
left from Oakland. Yes, you flew
But
to
it was the
Oakland.
separation that the reality, the
Yeah.
first couple of days really sank in.
Yeah. Well, I think the reverse was more traumatic for me. I don't know if you want to save that for later, but when I came back from Vietnam, I think the biggest distinction between us and soldiers from World War II is World War II returnees usually came home on boats, and they had time to decompress.
And
With
they
me-
were usually with their buddies, people
Right.
that they served with.
With me, we flew home, or with us, we flew home, and within 2 days, I was back on the streets. Now here I am without my rifle,
Yeah.
which you slept with for 365 days, even though I was in the mortar platoon. I still had, long story short, I'm driving, I got home right around July 4th, and I'm driving down the street with my wife Charlene, and the kids are throwing cherry bombs out. I almost put it
Oh.
through the windshield of the
I
car.
can't even imagine it.
I almost put it through the windshield of my car, reacting. So I think it was more traumatic for me to adjust to coming home than it was for me to leave. As stupid as this next sentence is going to be, I was actually excited to be in the Army at that time, because as I said before, I had no direction, and now I had this direction. And to me, in the beginning, it just seemed like this great adventure.
Sure,
I
sure.
had never been on a plane before, and now all of a sudden I was
Wow.
flying across the country, and you know, so going was actually an adventure for me. Where coming back, all I wanted to do, like all of us, was get home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us about the adventure, how it started when you actually flew into Benoit
Right.
and the plane stopped and they opened the door.
Ah.
What is your recollection of that?
My recollection of that was, it wasn't that bad getting off the plane. It just seemed like a military base to me at the time, until they brought us to this outdoor,
Reception station?
Station.
Yep, yep.
and that's where Paul and I saw each other.
No kidding.
Yeah, and because we didn't know we were both in the Army at the time, and we
Oh.
certainly didn't know we didn't go into to the same company.
So, not only that, you actually went in about the same time.
Yeah.
You had to.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And so there we are at this reception area outdoor thing, and we're talking up a storm. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And the guy is trying to acclimate us to Vietnam and tell us how poor our chances are of living from Company C wolfhounds.
yeah, that, you know what? And
Yeah.
whenever the name Wolfhounds was mentioned,
Yeah.
people were telling you how sorry they were.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what they did with me when they
Yeah.
handed me my orders and the guy saw
Yeah.
where I was going.
yeah,
He shook his head and he says, "I'm sorry."
yeah.
And I said, "Sorry for what?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "You'll find out."
Well, this guy, I don't remember. I'm going to shut off the volume so that doesn't happen again on my phone. He wasn't too. He didn't hold back to saying, probably 50% of you guys aren't coming home,
Yeah.
or you're coming home in a body bag. So that was my introduction to Vietnam.
Was that when you got to the company area, when you went to Charlie Company? When
No, that was, I think, just right prior to it.
okay, so yeah,
Okay.
because when you'd go to the bleachers to
Yeah,
see if
the
your name
bleachers,
was,
exactly.
and boy, they were not kind, were they?
No, they were not kind to
Jeez,
you at all. No,
I remember that.
Not at all. That was your introduction to Vietnam, and it was not in my mind, a pleasant introduction.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to take it one step further. The first night Paul and I do get to our company, where you guys were already out in the field someplace, you sent us out on patrol the first night, and I felt like the mosquitoes were were landing, like a landing zone on my arms and my face,
And they
because you're
bit,
fresh blood to
but
them.
they bit.
Yeah.
Oh.
At night, it was like almost I could hear them landing.
Do you remember
on
the
my arm.
welts? The welts.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But you know, I guess in time you get the smell of the country.
Well, and they
And
they gave
mosquitoes
us
tend
the
to
little
leave-
they
yeah.
gave us the little mosquito repellent.
Yeah, yeah.
That was like food
Yeah.
to them. I think it drew them.
Yeah.
I think it was an attractant.
I agree. I still think mosquito stuff that people put on when you're having a barbecued house. I think and those citronellas, I think they attract the mosquitoes.
I think they do too.
So anyway, that was the
So now
introduction.
now
to
you
it.
go to Charlie Company,
Right.
and they say you're going to 4th platoon.
Right.
Paul, you're going to 2nd platoon. But you guys both went out to probably Crockett.
You got a good memory.
I think.
What do you mean? Yeah, Crockett.
I think Crockett. Yeah, that's where. Yeah. So and now you're going to join your platoon.
Right.
Tell me about that. What was that like?
Here we are in beautifully clean jungle fatigues with the new hats and this, and we're perfect, and we're looking around, and everybody else is like, who have been out there for a while, they're not wearing the hats the way we had them, like the Australians wear them and all this stuff, and they're all dirty and what have you. and-
Ragtag.
a ragtag. And so all I can say to you is, the newness wore off real quick.
Yep. Do you remember some of the guys that you met at first when you first went into the platoon?
Yeah. I had heard from, and I'm trying to remember his last name, Carlisle. I don't know if you remember that name. He came from, I think, South Carolina or North Carolina. And after we were out, he called me once, and he was on a business trip in New York City, and we were going to try to get together. But it never happened, and I haven't heard from him since. Of course, Larry, we hit it off right away. Stanzik.
Mm-hmm.
And
Higgins?
Higgins, and also...
How do I know all this?
I don't know, because you've like kept up with this for 40 years. You've kept up with this. I'm having a hard time remembering what I did last week, let alone 25 years ago. And a good friend that recently passed away, and a good friend of Paul's. And I'm having a senior moment here. Oh, this is going to bother me. Paul's going to know this. Anyway, he lived in Manhattan.
So another New Yorker.
Another New Yorker. And Paul and I both became very friendly with him the whole time we were there. And he finally, we kept on telling him we would go out to dinner occasionally. And Paul would come from New Jersey and I would come from Long Island, and we met in Staten Island. And we finally convinced him to move to Florida. And he was only down
Rick
here
Galley.
Rick Galley. He was only
How
down.
do I know this?
Because I'm telling the story. He only came down here for 6 months and then passed away.
Yeah.
And a good friend to both Paul
He
and
was
I.
a great friend.
And we had a lot of laughs with Rick Galley.
Yep.
A lot of laughs with Rick Galley.
Yep.
Of course, there's other people that I became friendly with because you know it's just you're just together all the time.
Yep. So
And-
you're a new guy.
I'm a
Were
new
you
guy.
the only new guy that walked in that day into the platoon?
Into that platoon, yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what did they say? Did they say you're gonna go fill sandbags, or I mean, what did they do with the brand new guy?
No, what they did with me is they said, pick a spot, any spot, and
Because you got
Start
were you
digging a
were
hole.
you guys in a
Yeah.
like a circle?
and start digging a hole, and start doing sandbags to make your little bunker. And when you're done doing that, that mortar over there needs to be cleaned. And
And you'd
And
done,
I-
you'd done plenty of that in the
so
IT.
oh yeah, so I I played along with it all for the first couple of days, but it really didn't take long when you're together so much to start talking. Where are you from? Where
Oh
are you
yes,
from?
yes.
How'd you get here? How'd you get here? What are your plans for when you're going to
Did
go
anybody
home?
ask you if you knew how to fire the darn thing? I mean, that sounds kind of funny, but I mean, were they interested at all in knowing
Well,
if,
I think it was only a couple days after I got there that we had our
a
first fire mission.
fireman?
And you know, I was thrown on a tube, and you know, they gave me the deflection, they gave me the range, they gave me
So
everything.
you're doing the mortar.
Yeah,
You're not
yeah.
just the guy dropping the.
No, yeah. I was doing the actual mortar, okay, and then you had the guy dropping the
And you
tube.
know, I have to imagine, boy, that was the old heart was because now it was for real,
Yeah,
and you knew somebody
right,
was calling
right.
for this.
Right. Well, I don't know if you remember, I think it was Trang Bang, I think it was Trang Bang, where the church was, and actually the Arvin compound was under attack. That wasn't far from us.
Yeah.
And our captain called for us to support them a little bit by sending them illumination.
Oh yes.
That's where I got wounded, okay? Because I was in my little bunker, and the captain was calling for illumination rounds. So I did my crawl routine to where the mortars were, which was in a circle surrounded by bags. And I would hang around, okay?
Now, same thing, you gotta have so many bags.
Gotta have someone there.
Same deal.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, I hung around and then I would crawl back into my little bunker. Well, obviously the MVA was watching me,
Oh,
and on the third trip out, they must have timed me, and they dropped a bunch of their mortars right near
oh my gosh,
where I was shooting.
a reverse azimuth. They
and that's
reversed
where I
it.
got the shrapnel in my leg. Scariest night of my life, not because of the shrapnel in my leg, because it wasn't a really ultra bad wound.
Yeah,
But they still dusted me off. That was my first, well, we've been on helicopter rides many times before, but first in a situation where the helicopter pilot looked at me and he said, well, you're not that bad. Let's fly around and give support. And I went, do I have a choice in this? And he goes, no. And they're flying around shooting rockets and shooting off the 50 cals, and I'm going, oh my God, if I live through
I
this,
was, oh yeah,
if I live through this, I think I'll be all right. All this from some shrapnel that went
Yeah.
into my leg. I would have rather have stayed
sure,
in my bunker
sure.
than on that. But anyway, yeah, getting back to the meeting people and stuff like that, it doesn't take very long to generate friends when you're in that type of situation. You look for a buddy, I guess, to have you back all the time. That was one of the crazy things that I heard about Vietnam after I came back that I disagreed with totally. They talked about how much pot smoking was going on. Well, maybe that was in the base camps,
Not
but
in
it
our
wasn't,
outfit.
not in the field,
No.
and not in our out, because
And they were talking about heroin and
Yeah.
stuff. I never
you
saw
had to be
anything
able to trust the people around you.
and had to be ready to go.
Yeah, I know. We're sitting up at night on guard with nothing but some razor wire
Yeah,
protecting us from the enemy. So, my standpoint of view, I never saw any of that there. I never saw any of
I
that
did.
there.
Well, I didn't either.
And,
I mean, I knew there were some guys that were doing it when we were back
Yeah.
at Crockett,
yeah,
but it was in a bunker,
Yeah.
and I never.
yeah, yeah,
And that was only in the daytime if
Yeah.
we were in Crockett.
yeah,
And there were certain groups of people that did that.
yeah.
Most of the guys would
Yeah.
wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
No.
Did they issue you an M16 when you went in?
Yes.
So you're a soldier, a mortar person, but you're ready to shoot.
Yeah, well, if you remember, when we went out, we carried our rifle on one and
Yeah.
the mortar, the 60 millimeter on the other one, okay, on the other shoulder. So we went out with both, and we had to have ammunition for both.
Yep. Like a rucksack with
Yeah.
the rounds and so forth.
Yep.
I remember one time you guys went with us, and it was at night of all things,
Right.
and they made you take an 80.
Yeah.
And I remember the size of that base
But,
plate.
yeah.
And I don't know who got assigned to carrying that thing, but it was
Yeah.
in a pouch with
Yeah.
I thought, man, that's killer.
Yeah.
And they did it. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys hauled that
Yeah.
thing out there.
Well, I guess it depends on where you're going. When we're going just on a local little afternoon, walk through a village or what have you, the 60 is
Oh, yeah.
is good enough for anything you might encounter. But I guess if you're going out at night, that means we're going to look to get truly involved.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe they want a little bit more support.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember and I've told you this before, on many occasions when, because Paul
Yeah.
we were together,
Right.
and we'd be out there and we'd get in a firefight or something, and they'd call in illumination.
Yeah.
And he would always say, I hope my cousin Phil's on the end of this, on the end of this tube. I hope my cousin Phil's on the end of this tube. And I said, well, I do too, because, you guys were really good at what you did.
Well, that we were.
I mean,
I'll-
and I'm telling you from our end of the deal.
Yeah.
We're the ones out here
Yeah.
that needed
Yeah.
needed you.
Yeah.
And you always, now, the only time anything went wrong is when somebody gave you the wrong information.
And that had happened on occasion,
And,
yes.
and I know Delta Company
Yeah.
had a new lieutenant and took the ambush patrol to the wrong spot. And you guys you
Yeah.
knew where that ambush was supposed to be.
Right.
And so when this guy starts calling in for mortar support, and he's giving you whatever,
Wrong location, he's giving.
and dropped right in on
Yeah.
top of him.
Yeah.
And I know that's a horrible thing.
It's just like anything in war, I guess there's a lot of things that can go wrong. There are things that are going wrong in Afghanistan
Yes.
today, in Iraq. And today's wars, the communication is so much more enhanced than it was back in the Vietnam era. But yes, things can go wrong. I remember when we were out on one, and what was his name, Richardson, got shot from our own helicopters.
Yeah.
Because what had happened was we were in one paddy zone, and they were flying to the next paddy zone. And as typical when you're flying into a hot zone, the guns are blaring.
Absolutely.
You know, the guns are blaring to keep the enemy
Their
head
heads,
down.
their heads down, yeah.
And he wound up shooting on our particular company. And Richardson wound up going to Japan because he really got shot up on his back. And it shocked the hell out of me that he came back
Wow.
from that. You know, it really shocked the hell out of me that he came back. But yes, things can go wrong in war. They still go wrong today, even with all of this technology.
Do you remember ever being in a firefight where you were shooting the M16 instead of your mortar?
Oh yeah.
Give me an example of those circumstances.
Forget exactly where we were. We had set up a little camp outside of a couple of berms, rice paddy berms, and we started getting sniper fire. I'm trying to remember where it was. Anyway, we responded to that sniper fire.
That could have been up around Tain Inn,
It might have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, Canaan.
because we had a lot of that
Yeah.
going on up there.
And so, yeah, there were several times, even when we were in the woods with you guys, and all of a sudden we were taking fire, and everybody starts shooting like crazy.
Yeah, and that tube ain't doing you a lot of
No,
good.
it's no.
That's
it's
that
not. It's-
at that minute
point, no.
anyway.
It's not. It's not. So yeah, there were many times I shot my rifle. Do I know if I hit anybody? I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah, but you were putting it out there.
That was another funny thing. I was a tracer person, and they always said, don't do that. They would say put like a tracer round every, 8 rounds or 5 rounds? I was every other round.
Yeah,
And I thought to myself, well, it's good to see where I'm shooting, but it's also showing them where to shoot back at me.
there's a little, there's a give and take on that.
Yes, that's
I was a little bit like you. I
Yeah.
went every 3
Yeah.
because I really wanted to know
Where my bullets were going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Anyway.
so besides Richardson, do you remember anybody getting seriously wounded or killed?
Well, I know that, what's his name? Paul's, that he's gone to a lot of times. Glover.
Yes.
I know that he got wounded several times, and saw him having to go and get patched up and dusted off. I wasn't there. We all have stories about Vietnam. My one story was I had this bad feeling. We had gone through a period, I think it was in January or February, where we weren't seeing any activity. And I got this bad feeling about it. And so I went to Sergeant Myers, and I
So
said,
does that mean you weren't even doing fire missions much?
yes, we weren't doing fire missions
Mm.
much at all either at that time. And I just got this bad feeling. It was like it was too quiet.
Yeah.
And I hadn't taken my my R&R. So I went to Sergeant Myers and said, look, I want to get out of here. You know, I want to go on my R&R. And he says, well, where do you want to go? And I said, I don't care. Australia, Japan, Australia. Because I'll never get to see that place again in my life.
Did you get
And,
to go to Australia?
yeah, I got to go to
man.
Australia.
That was a
Spent,
tough one to get.
Yeah, well, I wound up going. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Anyway, that, when I was gone, is when the company got overrun. And I come back and Paul was gone. And they came to me and they said, your cousin got hit. I said, what are you talking about? He said, he's gone, he got hit. He said, not dead. No, flesh wound
Yeah,
to his face. And
in a
what
bunker.
happened. Yeah, and I missed that event, thank God.
You'd have been right there.
Yeah,
And who knows?
the night that they overran us,
And
I
you know,
missed
they,
that event.
and they overran the artillery pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
was a mess.
Yeah, so fortunate enough to have missed that one
But isn't
particular
that
event.
funny?
Yeah,
You had a feeling.
it was just too quiet.
Yep.
We weren't encountering anything.
Did any of your guys get hurt or knocked out besides Paul?
Well, Paul's the only one I remember,
And Glover, of
obviously,
course.
and Glover. But Paul's the only one I distinctly
How-
remember.
You must have. How quickly could you get information about what happened to him?
The only thing that everybody told me was that it was a face wound and that he was going to Japan. And then the next thing I know, a month goes by and I'm getting a letter from him with a picture of him and his future wife. And I went, you SOB.
For heaven's sake.
Because they couldn't, if anything happened to your face, Japan was not prepared to do surgeries
Yeah.
or things like that, so they sent you back to the state.
I see.
And but I mean, he put his time in, Paul, and he did a lot while he was there. So
Gosh, yes, I should say.
So you know, I'm not, you know, he got lucky actually out of that too.
Yeah.
I was lucky because I didn't want to be there at that time.
Yep.
And he was lucky just to wind up with a
Yeah.
face wound that didn't make him ugly.
Yeah. What was the worst day of your life in Vietnam?
The worst day.
Or night? I mean, what was the worst time that you can recall?
I think it was probably a couple of days before I was scheduled to leave. But I was digging my foxholes deeper and deeper.
The
And I-
shorter you got, the
Yeah.
deeper they got.
Yeah, and I had lost a lot of weight in Vietnam. I was down to something like 110 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
And to give you some perspective, I'm 175 now. Maybe I should lose some weight, but I think, and they called it, you know, to be a short timer. As you got closer and closer and closer to surviving this experience, you start thinking about things more, and you start reacting more.
Almost a paranoia.
Yeah, almost a paranoia. I mean, there were several times I was scared when we were under attack, but you asked me what I thought was the worst. It was like a couple of days before I was actually allowed to leave the field
Mm.
and go home. It was, I didn't want to come out of my bunker.
I know exactly how you felt.
You know, I didn't want to come out of my home.
I experienced a very,
Yeah.
very similar,
You know, because you
thing.
made it this far.
and you always knew or heard of one of the guys
Right.
that had been there for 11 months
Right.
and he only had a couple of days before they were gonna get him offline, and he
Right.
got killed.
Right.
We all knew,
Yeah.
we all knew somebody.
Yeah.
And that's always
Um,
played on, I know it played on your mind,
Yeah,
and it always
played on
played
mine.
on my mind
So-
too.
My answer to your question is like 2 or 3 days before I got
Yeah.
out of there.
How many months did you serve in Vietnam?
Oh, the full
The
12
12
months. The
months.
full 12 months. Yeah.
And you had the one wound.
Right.
Any other wounds besides that?
Well, according to the VA, I wound up with a heart condition at a very young age, and they attribute it to our exposure to Agent Orange.
Yes, of course.
It's kind of silly when you look back at it. I mean, we used to walk through that stuff.
We slept
after
in it. We slept in it.
slept in it. We took baths in bomb craters and all of that stuff. And so they attributed it to that. So the only other condition that
And
I
was that a
had-
situation like a valve issue, or what kind of a heart issue
all
was
of
it?
my arteries got clogged.
Okay, so stents.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, I had open heart surgery,
Oh.
quadruple bypass
Oh.
heart surgery. So now ask
But
me
that's
why
the-
I still have a cigarette after we're done with this interview.
That's the
I'm
big
gonna
one
light
though,
up a
right?
cig-
That's the big
That's
operation.
the big one, yeah. I might need it again now. Because right now, currently, as we're sitting here and talking, of the 4, they call them grafts. when
Yeah.
You do a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Of the 4 grafts, 2 have reclogged, and 1 is about 80% clogged. And the only thing that's keeping me truly alive is, thank God, it's the main artery that's still open.
Still good.
Still good.
Is that where they strip the veins from your legs, or?
Well, I don't know if you can see it, but my scar runs from
Oh,
here
yeah?
all the way up here to my groin. Well, it's kind of faded now. And spots, you can see it still.
Oh, yes. Oh, sure. Oh, my gosh.
No. That and my little knee wound, which
Yep.
still affects me though, because what happened was the shrapnel went into my knee here, and it kind of screwed up the cartilage, but I can still walk.
Yeah. And we all feel like, hey, if we're on our feet and we're moving,
That's it.
it's a good day.
That's a good day.
And do you remember the date that you left Vietnam?
That was the date I left Vietnam was right near 4th of July. I think it was the end of June that I left, because, as I said, I got home around the 4th of July, which was not good timing. So I'm going to say the end of June.
Tell me what it was like when you got home.
Oh, of course your family was ecstatic to hear you, but I was sick. And I knew I was sick. As I said, I went down to like 105, 110 pounds, and I was totally malnutrition and wound up with the non-contagious hepatitis. But I knew I was sick, but if I said anything before I left, they would have sent me to Japan. And I didn't want that to happen.
Well, it would have extended your.
So my eyes were all yellow.
Oh,
I
my
was sick to
gosh.
the stomach and what have you. And it wasn't from drugs, because I didn't do any drugs, and that was the first thing they checked.
Oh,
I
yeah.
went to the VA hospital in St. Albans. It's called St. Albans Hospital in Queens, while I was on leave. And I spent 3 months in the hospital. After a while, doing light duty things like mopping the hospital floors and
Yeah.
things like that. But the good thing about it was I was able, after about a month and a half, to go home, which I only lived maybe from this hospital 20 miles.
Oh, yeah.
So I was able to go home, and I actually wound up spending like a month and a half where I had a freedom. I had to go back to the hospital every day, do my duty, but then the sergeant then would let me go home.
Sure.
So now, when I'm finally healed and the sergeant calls me in and says, okay, well, you got to get back to, you're being discharged from the hospital. Here I am in New York City, 20 miles from my house, from my parents' house. And where do they send me? Fort Lewis, Washington.
Oh, jeez. A good infantry post.
2,800 miles away.
A good infantry
I
post.
said, Sarge, give me a break. I only got like 3 months left in the Army.
What did they have you do there?
It was a light duty profile. Now this you're going to find funny too. I was a banker, and I used to give out the
Payday.
$97 or 96 paydays.
The pay clerk.
Yeah, the pay clerk. And
You're right, 97 bucks.
okay, and you got to count that out 500 times a day.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, it wound up being pretty good duty. I missed Christmas again. They wouldn't let me go home, and but I got to know the guys who were the regular ones, the lifers, and everybody had to pull duty in the bank at night and stuff. And a lot of the locals who were in the military in Fort Lewis and had houses, I finally said to them, well, you go home, I'll cover your duty legitimately, and you'll pay me some money for covering your duty. And instead of sleeping in a barracks, I slept inside the bank at night because that's where they wanted me with my M16
I'll be
and what
darned.
have you. And so I'm getting paid from the Army, and now I'm getting paid to cover all this duty for all of these guys. I got my own bed in the
Wow.
bank. I got my own TV, and I made a bunch of money before I left the Army, which they came and got me after New Year's, because the way they said it to me is they wanted me to cover all of the enlisted guys' vacation coverages and stuff, so
Oh, yeah.
they could go home for the holidays. Meanwhile, of course, my future wife and my mother are going, where are you? It's the second Christmas without you. But anyway, they let me go after New Year's, about a week after New Year's, and then I went home, and that was it.
So when you went home, were you planning on getting married pretty quickly after that?
Yes,
And
yes.
when did that happen?
I got home in January. Believe it or not, Geico held my job for me
Yeah, a
for
lot.
those
You know,
2
that,
years.
that happened a lot.
Okay. Only they were, now that I was an experienced person, they gave me a better job.
You weren't just filing.
I was the supervisor in charge of the records department.
Of the filing.
Of the filing. The supervisor.
Probably got paid better too.
Definitely got paid better. And Charlene and I had planned our wedding for that upcoming August when we got married.
And so Geico, then, did that become a career?
That became a 10-year career for me.
What-
And I went from the record supervisor to a computer manager of a data processing center for them.
And when you even say that, that's old school.
Yeah.
Data processing,
I
remember
know.
that?
Well, I went to school for it after I got out of the
Wow.
Army, and the Army paid for it and what
Yes.
have you. And so one thing led to another. And I spent 10 years with Geico before moving on to another data processing job, only for Citibank or
Yeah,
Citicorp.
and you know,
Credit Service.
Geico was the largest military
Yes,
insurer.
yes. But Geico
A lot
struggled
of people
for,
don't know that.
Yeah, yeah. Geico struggled for a while, and Charlene and I had just bought a new home, and I hadn't gotten a raise with them in a couple of years, and it got a little frustrating. So that's when I started looking for a job and found this one at Citibank or Citicorp Credit Services. But
How did that go?
that went very well for about 7 years. I did credit card processing, and then I did investment savings for people, and that's how I kind of got to know Florida, because I would come down here to sit with retirees to invest their money.
So you were a financial.
Became
Oh.
a financial person after all of that.
Yeah.
And then they moved that center to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I don't know if you've ever been to Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Oh, yes.
About 30 years ago, there was nothing there. Well, now
Yes.
there's a big Citicorp building there that employs probably most of the people in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Well, they offered me a job out there, but here I am, Mr. City Slicker, you know,
Oh, yeah,
Mr.
sure.
New York. And I went out there for a couple of weeks, and then Charlene says, well, am I ever going to see it? I said, hell no, I ain't moving out to the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and it was.
Yeah. So I wound up leaving Citibank and going to
And
work.
if you didn't like the weather, the winters in New York, you'd have really not liked them in Sioux
I know.
Falls.
You got that right. You got that right.
So after the war, and now, did you keep in touch with any of the guys?
Mostly Larry
Okay.
is my main, and you guys.
Yeah, and Paul,
you,
of course,
and Paul, of course. I never really tried to contact any of the other guys, I guess because as everything in life, you get involved in your new marriage and your house, and now you're having children, and the next thing you're trying to get...
You know what, life just
you
gets
know,
busy,
yeah,
doesn't it?
and you're working, 40, 50, 60 hours a week there for a while. In the early stages of our marriage, I was working 2 jobs, and so the social aspect of your life is your family.
Was Charlene working too at the...
Yes, Charlene was working also. She wound up working for the IRS for 31 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was very close to her house. Another thing that started off as, well, I'll go to work and help with the bills and raising the kids. So she used to work at night, and I used to work during the daytime.
Yep,
And we'd pass at dinner time.
yep.
And then we had our Saturdays and Sundays. But then eventually, when the kids got to be old enough to get on the bus by
course.
themselves, then she switched to days, and
Yep.
and we wound up doing those hours too. But she worked for the IRS for 31 years as a auditor,
Mhm.
primarily.
Is there anything that I haven't brought up that you want in your interview about Vietnam or about your life? What have I not brought up, or what's important that you don't want to not have on this interview?
Well, everything that we've said on this interview is fine, and I'm
Yeah.
good with it. I'm totally good with it. I think the only thing that I'd like to add is it was, recently over the last 7 or 8 years that Vietnam became an area that you could go as a tourist
Yes.
and see as a tourist. And some friends of mine asked me, well, would you want to go? And I went, no. And they asked me because of the war, and I said, no. It's just not a destination that's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I feel when I really think about it, which is not that often, I'm happy for the people of Vietnam, because after we left there, after a while and after years, they finally got peace. And what I mean by peace is bombs weren't dropping
Yes.
every night.
They weren't in war all the
They
time.
weren't in war all of the time.
For 100 years, those people
Right.
were in war.
So I'm happy for the people of Vietnam. What I'm unhappy about is that we failed to give them democracy. Okay? And I don't think it was the soldiers' fault. There was a lot of political stuff going on
Yes.
at that time. And in my heart, I believe that we probably could have won the Vietnam War tops 2 years
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
if we were allowed to actually do what war is
Yes.
supposed to do.
Yep.
Okay? And so, to recap, I'm happy for the people of Vietnam because they have peace.
Yep.
Me personally, I'm fine.
Good.
I love talking to you. I appreciate what your son Tim is doing.
Yep.
And Paul, if you're listening, for a year I picked up after you. No, not quite a year. He would come in for patrol at night and he'd drop his, what was that other thing, that gun thing that shot the hand grenades?
Oh, the duper.
The duper.
The M79.
He'd come walking in after at night out on a patrol. He'd drop that, he'd drop his rifle, he'd drop his backpack. Now I come along and pick it all up for him.
Yep.
But it was good to have my cousin there.
Oh, I can. You know what? That
And,
was one of the freakiest things too,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
we,
yeah.
that meant we spent a lot more time
Right.
with you just because of the association.
Yeah, right.
We spent more time with the mortar guys than
Yeah,
we would
it
ever
never done.
done.
Yeah. I'd like to thank you, John, for all you are doing for veterans, because I know you're doing more than just the Wolfhounds, and for the Wolfhounds, and to all of my Wolfhound guys out there. Hang in there, guys. We made it. We're the lucky ones.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
What is your definition of a hero?
My definition of a hero is a father who does everything that he has to do to support his family and is true to his ideals in a country like America, where we have the opportunity, truly have the opportunity to do good things in America. But a true hero to me is a father that takes care of his family, gives it all.
Yep.
You don't have to be rich to have fun. I mean, you can go on a picnic
Yes,
and
indeed.
have a blast.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay? So, that's my answer to that question.
What does the American flag mean to you?
Everything. Everything you can think of. Everything good the American flag stands to me. I cry still when the national anthem is played at a ball game or something like that. It still stands for all of the good things that can happen in this world. It's harder today with all of the conflicts going on in all of the different parts of the world. But America still stands for freedom and democracy. That hasn't changed. People don't understand what's going on with immigration. It's, in my opinion, it's not that we don't want immigrants coming to America. We do.
We just
with
like
this
to know
country-
who's coming.
We just like to know who's coming. I mean, all of the prior, Italians, Irish, Germans, even Russians of the last 10 years,
Sure.
they came in through the front door.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Good point.
And I come here. We want you to be
Sure.
here, okay? But you can't come here illegally, and expect to get all of our services and not contribute, okay? I mean, my grandparents came here. They didn't have a dime, and they couldn't speak English, and still they made it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you can, and there's stories of that all the time. But come in the front door.
Yeah.
So, overall, to answer your question, to me, the American flag still stands for all of the great things that can be accomplished in the world. And I'm so proud of it. It's ridiculous.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
One of my final thoughts.
Sure.
What has your wife meant to you?
Oh, she's my partner in crime. I could not have done it without my wife. Okay, we're married last month, August 23rd, 49 years. And we worked everything together, everything. And I think that's kind of the problem today with the young people. Once they come across a rough spot, they don't know how to just talk it out or work it out with your partner. It just seems easier, well, let's get a divorce. That's not the answer, because in most cases you wind up with a bigger problem because
Oh,
you
yes.
marry somebody else with more children, and
Yes.
it winds up being a bigger problem. The secret to, in my mind, to a good marriage is communication. My wife and I have talked our whole lives. I mean, we can find stuff to talk about on an 18-hour drive to New York.
Sure.
That goes on and on. And of course, I love her.
Yes.
And I realized that when I was in Vietnam, that she loved me, because she wrote me a letter every day. We didn't get them every day. Sometimes we got them in groups
Oh, yeah,
of
yeah.
5, 6, or 10. But she wrote me a letter every day, and it was in those letters that I realized that my wife loved me.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So I knew I loved her,
That's amazing.
and now I know she loved me.
Yes.
The rest is history.
Final thought.
Sure.
I mentioned in the very beginning
Uh-huh.
that someday, not only your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids, and in the future, what would I want you to look right in that camera.
Okay.
What would your best advice be to them?
My best advice to my current grandchildren, my daughter and my son already know this, but future great-grandchildren and children, is to remember that it's easy to handle the good times. Anybody can handle the good times. Your true character comes out in how you handle the bad times in life. And all of us have periods where things are rough or not going our way.
Could be health
It
issues.
could be health issues. It could be a lot of different things. It's, maybe you got laid off for 6 months or something.
Yes, yes.
How you handle that period of hard time is your true character. And if you handle it well, you will have a good life, because then you'll be able to figure out anything as it goes along.
Perfect. Great advice.
All right.
Phil, I don't
John,
know how to thank you enough for a couple of different things.
Okay.
Number one, you were always there for us. And I've talked to you about this
Right.
before.
Right.
And thank you for allowing me and Tim to come into your home and spend, this has been really quality time.
Okay.
And-
Well,
and
I thank
just-
you.
I
for
can't
doing-
thank you enough.
You're welcome. I've kind of enjoyed it. It gave me a little perspective on a long period, a long stretch of time. You made me think about some things, but thank our current soldiers
Yes.
and armed services men that are all over the world for protecting us.
Thank you.
And thank you, John, for this, and Tim. Thank you.